Namaskar, this is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. New week, new conflict, this time in South Asia. It's Pakistan versus Afghanistan. Pakistan has carried out airstrikes on Afghan soil. It has bombed 2 places in Afghanistan. Kabul has responded. Tonight we'll tell you where this is heading. Will it be an all-out war? Can either side afford it? Meanwhile, there's a battle for batteries and China seems to be winning it as the US works on its next moves. Elsewhere, Europe is being its hypocritical self, lecturing the world about democracy but showering autocrats with money to keep migrants at bay. In Russia, Vladimir Putin has won a record 5th term in office. What will it change for Moscow and the world? In Japan, the world's last negative interest rate regime is ending. What does it mean? Why is Tokyo doing it now? Is Apple working on a deal with Google to get artificial intelligence in iPhones? Schools teach children to avoid junk food. Why do school canteens sell it then? How the Indian Navy carried out a 40-hour operation and captured Somali pirates, why Iceland has declared an emergency over a volcanic eruption, and what's Forgive Mom and Dad Day. We'll discuss the headlines first. In India, opposition leader Rahul Gandhi is on the back foot after attacking the government using the word Shakti, which means might. Prime Minister Modi says India's women personify Shakti. The ruling BJP calls Gandhi's remark misogynistic. The Congress leader claims the government is twisting his words. Israel spy chief to hold talks with Qatari Prime Minister on Gaza truce, say sources. These talks in Doha are the first since mediators failed to secure a truce before Ramadan. Earlier, Hamas had demanded that Israel withdraw from Gaza completely, but now they're willing to accept a partial retreat to agree to a truce. At least 16 soldiers killed in Nigeria. They were responding to a distress call during a clash between 2 communities. The attack took place in the oil-rich Delta state. President Bola Tinubu has ordered a manhunt to bring the perpetrators to justice. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi on a rare visit to New Zealand. This is the start of his diplomatic blitz through New Zealand and Australia. It's Wang's first visit to either country since 2017. The focus will be on trade as Beijing battles economic slowdown at home. And Cubans stage rare protests over food and electricity shortages. Some places in the island are without power for 14 hours a day. The cash-strapped nation has also hiked the fuel price by more than 400%. Cuba is facing its worst economic crisis since the 1990s. Breakups can be ugly. There can be a lot of shouting, a lot of emotions, maybe even some salty messages. But this breakup has taken it to the next level. It involves fighter jets, airstrikes and terrorism. I'm talking about Pakistan and the Taliban. They're both clashing again. The Taliban says Pakistan bombed 2 Afghan areas. The first was Barmal in the Paktika province. The second was Sepera in Khost. Now, both provinces border Pakistan. The Taliban says Pakistani planes flew in at around 3 a.m. local time, dropped bombs in 2 places, then flew back. And casualties? Around 8 people have been killed. The Taliban claim that they were women and children. And what is Pakistan saying? Well, they have admitted to carrying out airstrikes, but not in Afghanistan. Islamabad says this operation was inside Pakistan. They claim 8 terrorists were killed. Now, the motive is pretty clear. Pakistan suffered a terror attack over the weekend. A military post in Waziristan was attacked. Around 7 soldiers were killed and 2 of them were officers. Now, this attack was later claimed by a new terror group. It's called Jaish-e-Fursan-e-Mohammed. Pakistan says this group is based in Afghanistan and the Taliban shields them. So a response was always on the cards. A funeral for the slain Pakistani soldiers was held on Saturday. President Asif Ali Zardari and Army Chief Asim Munir attended it. Both men appeared quite involved. Take a look at this.
मैं आपसे ये वादा करता हूँ कि ये मेरे बेटों का खून रागा नहीं जाएगा और हम इस खून का खराज लेंगे, इनसे सबसे खराज लेंगे। पाकिस्तान ने यह तय कर लिया है कि जो भी हमारे सरहदों पे या हमारे घर में आके या हमारे मुल्क में आके जो भी टेररिज्म करेगा, हम उसका मुंह तोड़ जवाब देंगे।
So there was a warning. Pakistan's president hinted at a military response, and 24 hours later it came. But how is the Taliban reacting to it? Their statement makes for an interesting read. Let me quote from what the Taliban has said. We have a long experience of freedom struggles against superpowers. We do not allow anyone to invade our country. This is the Taliban saying. Pakistan should not blame Afghanistan for the lack of control, incompetence and problems in its own territory. How about that? The Taliban says Pakistan is incompetent, and it's not just words. They're hitting back militarily too. There were reports of a gunfight near the border. Apparently, the Taliban fired at Pakistani military targets. So it's a cycle of tit-for-tat attacks. But how did things descend to this level, and what happens next? Let's go all the way back to 2021. Pakistan supported the Taliban's conquest of Kabul. They urged the global community to work with the Taliban to give them aid. But soon the equation changed. Pakistan needed the Taliban's help to contain the TTP, that's Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, basically the Pakistani Taliban. Their goal is to establish an Islamic caliphate in the country. How? By toppling the current regime. But these Taliban have ethnic ties. Most of their rank and file are Pashtuns. So Pakistan hoped the Taliban would use their influence, maybe rein in the TTP, but the opposite has happened. A United Nations report has detailed this nexus. It says the Taliban is arming and funding the TTP. They're setting up training camps, giving them aid packages, and also shielding them from Pakistan. And the data supports this. Some 650 attacks were reported last year. They killed almost 1,000 Pakistanis. Around 93% of these attacks were in two provinces, Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And what's special about them? Both provinces border Afghanistan. So you can join the dots here. The Taliban is giving a safe haven to the TTP. And what has Pakistan done about it? In 2022, they launched similar airstrikes. Around 47 Afghans were killed in the bombing. Then Afghan refugees were deported. There are 4 million of them in Pakistan. Around 1.7 million were ordered to leave. Again, the idea was to build pressure on Kabul, but no luck. Finally, Pakistan complained to the United Nations. They asked the United Nations Security Council to act against the Taliban. Again, no luck. Because the international community has moved on. They may criticize and condemn, but they're not coming to save Pakistan, which raises the question, what next? Well, this Pakistani regime looks weak. The civilian government is deeply unpopular, and the army's foothold has eroded. In January, the Iranians flew into Pakistani airspace. They bombed a border town in the west. So the regime had to send a message, a strong and symbolic message that Pakistan is capable of defending itself. Allahu Akbar. Hence this airstrike on Afghanistan. At the same time, they may not want an escalation. Why else would they deny striking inside Afghanistan? So the next move is the Taliban's. They have a lot of options to choose from. The easiest would be another proxy attack to unleash the TTP again. But either way, it's a lesson for Pakistan's generals. They backed the Afghan Taliban as good terrorists. They fought the Pakistani Taliban as bad terrorists. And now look at them. Both good and bad have joined hands. And together, they're bleeding Pakistan. I'm afraid Islamabad is alone in this battle, not because the world doesn't care about terrorism. We do. But because Pakistan is responsible for this mess. Their deep state funded and armed terror groups. There's no point complaining now. What are the biggest names in EV? You'll guess the easy ones, of course, like Tesla or BYD. Those are car makers, though. What about the units that power those cars? I'm talking about batteries. It's equally important, if not more. And one country is monopolizing this industry. That country is China. Just look at this list. The top battery makers for electric vehicles. At number 1 is CATL. It stands for Contemporary Amperex Technology Limited, CATL. Chances are you've never heard of this company. But look at its market share. It's almost 37% as of last year. 1 out of 3 batteries sold are made by this company, CATL, and its clients are the likes of Tesla, Volkswagen, and BMW. At number 2 on our list is BYD. They have around 16% market share. Now guess what's common between these two firms? CATL and BYD. Both are Chinese. Together they make up 53% of all EV batteries. So randomly take 2 electric vehicles, one of them will have a Chinese battery. Do you see why that's a problem? Going forward, most vehicles are expected to be electric, and those vehicles will need batteries. If China controls that market, it gives them power. They can choke rival countries or drive up prices or use the batteries as a bargaining chip, a bit like the Gulf does with oil. So what are other countries doing? The US is pressuring local car makers, for example, Ford. CATL and Ford struck a deal to build batteries in Michigan. But American politicians opposed it. So Ford is scaling back this project. The factory's proposed capacity has been cut by 40%, 40. But why not ban it completely? Why not remove Chinese batteries from the markets altogether? Because alternatives are few. You see, China has played the long game here. They've made themselves indispensable in this industry. And they've done so with 3 steps. The first was acquiring raw materials. In this case, the raw material is lithium. It's a silvery metal used to make batteries. Now, China has around 8% of the world's lithium. The rest they're buying. In the last 2 years, China has bought stakes in 20 lithium mines, 20. Most of them are in Africa and Latin America. So that's raw material check. The next step is refining it. Again, China has a head start. In the last 4 years, the world has spent $300 billion on battery factories. China made up 74% of that. So that's processing, also check. The final step was helping these battery makers flourish. They've been given massive state subsidies. In fact, CATL topped the list. They got $391 million in 6 months. So naturally, they're ahead. Experts say American firms will take 5 to 10 years to catch up. Imagine that, a whole decade just to catch up. So the world finds itself in a tough spot. On the one hand, you need EVs, and by extension, you need batteries. On the other, you cannot bet on Chinese supply chains. They're simply not reliable. So what's the solution? One is to use regulatory powers to legally reduce the dependence on Chinese batteries. China may complain at first, but eventually they'll have to agree. After all, a lot of money is at stake. Beijing has invested billions of dollars in this industry. Eventually, they will want returns, which is why the likes of CATL are striking a conciliatory tone. They've denied collecting or sharing American data. The second solution is to think domestic, to build your own battery factories. Let's consider India. We import 100% of our lithium. Basically, there is no domestic production. Out of these imports, 95% is from China. So New Delhi is looking to diversify. In January, the government decided to invest $24 million in Argentina. The plan is to develop 5 lithium mines there. Of course, all of this is going to take time. Most experts say it could take at least a decade. But it's important to work in this direction. It's never ideal to keep buying critical resources from abroad. And in this case, the supplier is not even your ally. It's a strategic rival in China. So expect the battle for batteries to heat up in the coming years. Now let's turn our attention to Egypt. Their president is Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. He's a former military man. He even reached the rank of field marshal before opting for a different career. In 2013, he decided to take over his country, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. He orchestrated a coup and he ousted Egypt's first democratically elected president, a certain Mohamed Morsi. El-Sisi took power, won a presidential election the following year, and has ruled since 2013. The man he dethroned was put in jail and he died there in 2019. After hearing all of this, what do you think about Abdel Fattah el-Sisi? Not exactly a champion of democracy, right? At least according to the Western definition of democracy, you may expect the West to despise El-Sisi, impose their usual sanctions on him, or even plot regime change in Egypt. But the exact opposite is happening. The West is showering El-Sisi with gifts.
Today marks a historic milestone with the signature of our joint declaration for a strategic and comprehensive partnership. It is a partnership based on 6 main pillars, 6 areas of mutual interest for Europe and Egypt. And I'm pleased to announce that this will be supported by a new financial and investment package of 7.4 billion euros for the coming 4 years.
The European Union has promised Egypt $8 billion. $8 billion. It will be in the form of grants, concessional loans and other funds. This payout will take place over the next 4 years. The EU has also upgraded their relationship with Egypt. It is now a strategic partnership. Now, considering what we know about Egypt's past, all this may come as a shock. But there's a reason why the EU is humouring Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. It's something they view as an existential threat.
We agree on a package ranging from trade and investment to low-carbon energy, managing migration.
Partners in eliminating irregular migration.
Or whether it comes to cooperating in issues such as migration.
This initiative is also the best way to tackle the migration challenge.
Illegal migration, that's the reason El-Sisi is getting paid. He has served the EU well. He has stopped migrants from using Egypt as an exit ramp. And for this, he is being rewarded. Everything else is just a whitewash. The EU is prepared to forgive anything and everything if it means they can stem the tide of migrants. Abdel Fattah el-Sisi is not the first to be rewarded like this. In December, the EU signed a similar deal, a similar migration deal with Tunisia. Tunisia is led by President Kais Saied, another authoritarian. He has cracked down on press freedom, opposition politicians and Tunisia's judiciary, but he has also cracked down on Europe-bound migrants. So guess what the EU is choosing to focus on? It's the same story in Mauritania. The EU signed a migration partnership with this country earlier this month. Guess who the Mauritanian president is? This man, Mohamed Ould Ghazouani. He's a former chief of army staff. He was part of Mauritania's ruling military junta twice. Ghazouani helped oust presidents twice, and his immediate predecessor is in jail. After all of this, the European Union is giving this country millions of euros. What happened to the ethics and morality that the West is always touting? And look, we understand that pragmatism trumps rhetoric. We know that sometimes you have to do unpleasant things for the greater good. Everyone does it. But that's not the real issue here. It's the blatant hypocrisy that is gut-wrenching.
Together, we will also work on our commitment to promote democracy and human rights.
That was the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. She says the deal with Egypt, will, and I'm quoting, promote democracy and human rights. Is she trying to convince us or herself? Either way, no one is buying it. This is what we mean by European hypocrisy. They'll say all this nonsense and go ahead and pay off authoritarians. It's why their reputation is in tatters and why no one really wants to listen to Western lectures. They keep proving time and again that they do not practice the democratic values that they preach. Now let's look at Russia and President Vladimir Putin. A leader the West does not hesitate to criticize. Putin has won Russia's presidential election again. This will be his 5th presidential term. He's set to become the country's longest-serving elected leader. He will even surpass Joseph Stalin before this term is up. And far from anti-incumbency, Putin's popularity is on the rise. He won the election with a record 87% vote share. So what does this mean for Russia, for the war in Ukraine, and the bigger geopolitical picture? How will Putin's expected victory impact the world? Here's our report.
Polling closed in Russia yesterday. After 3 days of voting, Russia picked its next president. Of course, the results were never in doubt. With a resounding 87% in early counting, Vladimir Putin returned with another landslide. He will be Russia's president for a record 5th term.
First of all, I want to thank the citizens of Russia. We are all one team. All the citizens that came to polling stations and voted. Once again, I want to say this is very important. This has no formal character. The source of authority in the nation is the Russian people.
He thanked the people of Russia, but Putin's opponents have slammed the polls. They called the election a sham.
We have seen the Russian elections, and stemming from the 27 will be issued after the Council. But I want to anticipate that this has not been free and fair elections.
The EU says the elections weren't free or fair. British Foreign Minister David Cameron agreed. German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock called it an election without a choice. The US and other Western nations will add their 2 cents soon enough. But so far, the harshest criticism has come from, no prizes for guessing, Ukraine.
There is not a single bit of legitimacy in this simulation of an election, and there cannot be. This actor should be on trial in The Hague.
It's expected that Zelensky would be furious. He is losing the war. To add insult to injury, Russia held voting in the annexed parts of Ukraine, via a ballot bus in some places. So it seems Putin has no intention of returning the annexed land. He considers them Russian citizens and voters now. Putin even spoke about creating a buffer zone between Ukraine and Russia, using present Ukrainian territory, meaning Ukraine still has a long fight ahead of it. That's why Zelensky seems angrier than usual. But while Russia's enemies seethe with rage, Putin's allies sent their congratulations.
With more than 87% votes, Putin has completely won the war against the entire collective empire of the West.
China congratulates on this. China and Russia are each other's largest neighbors and comprehensive strategic partners in the new era. That under the strategic guidance of President Xi Jinping and President Putin, China-Russia relations will continue to move forward.
Putin also said that China-Russia ties would continue to grow, which is more bad news for the West. The Russian president has won a resounding mandate. It will embolden him to stick with his current path. Unless the West finds a way to get along with Russia, the world may be in for a rough few years.
Japan is preparing for a massive change. The central bank is meeting today and tomorrow. At the end of it, a major decision is expected, one that could shake up Japan's economy. And what is that decision? Japan is ending its negative interest rates. Now bear with me for a minute. All of us know how interest rate works. Say you deposit $1,000 in your account and the bank interest is 10%. Then you get $100 as interest. That's how it normally works. But negative interest is the opposite. Let's take Japan's case. Their interest rate is minus 0.1%. So you won't be paid money for your deposits. Instead, you will have to pay the bank to keep your money there. How much? In this case, 0.1% of $1,000. That's the negative interest rate. 0.1% of $1,000 is $1. Now, I know you have questions, so let's break this down into 3 parts. First of all, why did Japan have this weird system? Second, why are they changing it? And 3, what will it mean? Negative interest is a policy tool of central banks. They use it to fight falling prices. Now, you may be wondering, what's wrong with that? Isn't lower prices good for consumers? Well, in the short run, yes. But over long periods, no, it's not good. When prices fall, companies make less money. After all, their products are now cheaper, so they're making less money. And when companies make less money, they cut down production. Less production requires fewer jobs. So eventually, you will see layoffs. Your economy will flatline, and that's what Japan was experiencing. In the 1990s, they fell into a recession. There was a stock market and real estate crisis in Japan. Most Japanese banks reported massive losses. So afterwards, they had no money to lend. This led to a gradual fall in money supply and circulation. And the end result? Deflation, meaning prices decreased over time. Another factor is Japan's work culture. The first priority for most Japanese employees is job security, not a massive bonus, not a double-digit hike. Most of them just want security. As a result, companies hold back on raises. Again, the end result is the same: less spending, less inflation. To combat this, Japan entered negative interest rates in the year 2016, and the idea here was quite simple. Force banks to keep lending more, force people to spend more. Basically, do anything but park your money in bank accounts. Some European banks have also tried this back in the 2010s. But today, there is only one negative interest regime in the world, and that is Japan. So why are they changing it now? Because Japan's wish has come true. They finally have inflation. Prices rose by almost 2% in January. It was the third straight month of inflation. One reason for that is geopolitics. The wars in Ukraine and West Asia both have driven up energy prices around the world. And Japan does not have its own energy. Around 90% of their oil is from West Asia. Now, as the prices rose, so did Japan's inflation. Another reason is the record wage hike. Every year, Japanese companies negotiate with workers' unions and they decide on their salary hike. This year, it's 5.28%. That's the wage hike. It's the biggest in more than 33 years, 5.28%. All the big companies are on board this time, like Toyota Motors. They've announced their largest pay hike in 25 years. But how will this help inflation? Well, more income equals more spending. More spending equals more inflation. So Japan's central bank is now optimistic. They feel confident enough to increase the interest rate, to exit the negative interest regime. Like I said, the current rate is minus 0.1%. The plan is to increase it to 0.1%. Which brings us to the final question. What will be the impact of this move? Well, it's good news for the companies and banks. If prices rise, companies will make more money, and that money will fund corporate expansion. We're talking more jobs, more investments. It could rescue Japan from its economic rut. Until 2024, Japan was the third largest economy in the world, but in January this year, it slipped to the fourth spot. Germany took the third rank, and that too in the middle of a recession. So Tokyo needs to jumpstart its economy. Let's see if exiting the negative interest regime helps them do that. Our next story is about an unlikely union, Apple and Google. Two tech rivals are looking to collaborate. Apple wants to use Google's AI chatbot on iPhones. It is in talks to license Gemini, and at this point, none of this is confirmed. But if it happens, it won't be a first. Samsung already uses Google's AI technology. Apple can do the same. A potential deal will give Google's AI dreams a big boost. It could be rolled out on 2 billion phones. Plus, it could help Apple. They've been slow with their rollout of artificial intelligence. Getting Google on board will make up for this weakness. So is it a win-win deal for the tech giants, or is there a catch here? Our next report tells you.
The year was 2012. Apple had just launched iOS 6. Everything looked familiar, but there was a glaring difference. If you went to the Maps app, it was no longer the usual Google Maps. It had been replaced by Apple Maps. This was a shock for Google. After all, the companies were close allies. But the friendship soon hit a roadblock. Google launched its own operating system. Apple did not take that well. It was called the Mapping Wars. Many people even called it the Tech Cold War. But the two companies have since come a long way. They may not always see eye to eye, but that hasn't stopped them from collaborating. The latest example being this. A new report says Apple is in talks with Google for its AI chatbot Gemini. It could license it for iPhones. Gemini could power new features in the new iPhone software. All of this is speculation for now, but talks of the deal gave both companies a boost. Alphabet shares were trading 5.5% higher, and Apple shares were up by almost 2%. The deal could be a win-win situation for both companies. Let's look at Google first. It has poured money into artificial intelligence. But the tech giant still lags behind in the AI race. Plus, Gemini has been accused of historical inaccuracy. It has faced backlash in India. So Google hasn't had a smooth run. If the deal is passed, Gemini could be available on over 2 billion iPhones. That would give Google's AI dreams a big boost. For Apple, it's more of a mixed bag. The positive here is that it could squash investor fears over a slow AI rollout. New iPhone models would have generative AI features, but there's also a risk here. That would mean Apple's own AI technology is not up to the mark. CEO Tim Cook has long spoken about Apple's AI dreams. He says the company is significantly investing in generative AI. Reports suggest that Apple is testing out an in-house chatbot. It's called Apple GPT, but it's believed to be inferior to other models. Using Gemini for its phones will prove just that. This isn't the first time Apple and Google have come together. Google is the default search engine in Safari. It's a deal that the companies cracked 20 years ago. Google pays Apple $10 billion every year to remain the default, so a new deal wouldn't be unprecedented. But Google isn't the only one Apple is talking to. It's also in talks with OpenAI's ChatGPT. No deal is likely to be announced in the coming months. We'll only find out when Apple rolls out its new software later this year.
Do you remember your school canteen? For most of us, it was a happy place, a place to hang out, a place to chat with friends, and a breather between classes. But do you remember what was served in those canteens? Chances are it was junk food, chips, soft drinks, fried items, all types of packaged foods. And it's not just your school canteen, it's the case with school canteens across the globe. They serve junk food to children. In the US, the state of California wants to change that. It wants to ban junk food in schools. Food with artificial dyes and chemicals like Cheetos, Doritos, Fruit Loops, and other popular snacks. They contain dyes and chemicals, and the state says these ingredients are linked to health risks, so they must be banned. The bill is yet to be passed, but once it's enacted, schools can no longer serve these items. Now, this is only for California. But we want to highlight this story in the hope that schools and governments across the world take note and follow suit. I'll tell you why. By repeating what you probably already know. Why junk food is a problem and what exactly qualifies as junk. Food that contains high levels of fat, salt or sugar. It's usually low on fiber, protein and vitamins. It has little or no nutritional value. It is addictive and it spikes your energy levels almost instantly. Plus, it harms your body. Junk food messes up with your concentration levels. It causes digestive problems. It's linked to diabetes and cholesterol. It can cause heart diseases, even strokes, and in some cases, even cancer. It is also linked to obesity in children. Globally, over 400 million children are overweight. 37 million of them are below the age of 5. Obesity in children is a growing epidemic, and in a lot of cases, it is linked to junk food. So it is bad, and we know it. But our children still consume it. It is still widely available in schools across the world. Has it ever occurred to you why? Schools teach children to avoid junk food with lessons and activities starting from pre-nursery, but the same schools offer children the same junk food in canteens. What gives? And it's not like no one has tried to change this. Some countries did try. Like in Canada, schools have banned junk food. Same with Chile. Norway restricts the availability of junk food to kids. Japan has some of the healthiest children in the world because of their society's war on junk food. But what about India? In 2020, a new directive on junk food was issued in India. It came from the FSSAI, that's the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India. It's the food regulator, basically. It proposed a ban on junk food in schools. And not just in schools, at least 50 meters around schools. No ads or sales of junk food. That was the proposal. But it has changed little, because the implementation depends on schools. Also, this directive was only for public schools. So private schools continue teaching against junk food in class and serving it in canteens. And even if some schools try to change it, the market is hard to resist because there's a lot of money riding on junk. India is an emerging market for junk food companies. The sale of snacks and soft drinks has almost tripled in the last 10 years. In 2023, the sale of junk food in India crossed $30 billion. This is at the cost of your child's health. Enter any school canteen and chances are you'll be greeted by packets of chips and soft drinks. They would tempt anyone, even adults, so why blame children? A child's food choices are influenced by their environment. If junk food is available, chances are they'll eat it, which is why schools play a crucial role here. They must be healthy places. They must shape healthy food habits. They must help improve children's diets, which means regulation is the only way to go. Schools are the building blocks of a child's life. It's time they walk the talk on healthy eating. Our next story is from the Indian Ocean. The Indian Navy has proved itself yet again here. They conducted a daring anti-piracy operation, an operation that lasted 40 hours. The target was a ship captured by Somali pirates. A Maltese-flagged bulk cargo vessel called the MV Ruin. The ship was captured by Somali pirates back in December. For months, they were holding the crew hostage until Saturday. That's when the Indian Navy sprung into action. They rescued the crew and captured 35 pirates. The pirates are now being brought to India, where justice will be dispensed. Here's our report.
The Indian Navy has pulled off a daring rescue. It has reiterated its position as guardian of the Indian Ocean. This weekend, the Navy saved the lives of 17 people. 17 people who had been captured by a horde of Somali pirates. It was a daring rescue. It took 40 hours. And a little help from the Indian Air Force. Here's how it went down. On December 14th, Somali pirates had captured this ship, the MV Ruin. It's a bulk cargo carrier. It was carrying steel. It was sailing near the Yemeni island of Socotra. That's where the pirates struck. They captured the ship and held its crew hostage. It was the first time Somali pirates captured a ship since 2017. The pirates turned the MV Ruin into a mothership, effectively a base of operations to launch further attacks from. All this happened in mid-December. The crew was held hostage for over 3 months, and the world struggled to do much because they were being used as human shields. But the Indian Navy was watching. It has been monitoring the Ruin all this time, waiting for the perfect opportunity, and that opportunity arose over the weekend. On Friday, the Ruin was intercepted by the INS Kolkata guided missile destroyer. Backing up the INS Kolkata was a patrol vessel, the INS Subhadra. The rescue squadron also comprised of P-8I long-range maritime patrol aircraft and maritime spotter drones. This squadron intercepted the Ruin. The Indian Navy issued a warning, telling the pirates to surrender and release the hostages. But the pirates responded by firing at the Indian Navy. They even shot at one of the Navy's drones, which had approached the ship to conduct reconnaissance. And that was their biggest mistake. The Indian Navy could now act in self-defense. The 40-hour mission had begun. The Indian ships cornered the Ruin. Warning shots were fired. The Indian Navy kept telling the pirates to surrender, but a second prong of the operation was also underway. An Indian Air Force C-17 Globemaster transport craft was being readied. Indian Marine Commandos, or Marcos, boarded the plane. After a 10-hour flight, the forces were above the pirate ship. And then they executed a precision airdrop. The commandos were dropped near the pirate vessel, as were 2 raiding boats. This allowed the Indian Navy to close in on the pirates and eventually board the ship. The 35 Somali pirates were captured, the 17 crew members were rescued, and the Indian Navy pulled off a heroic feat.
We are investigating all suspicious vessels which have a piracy trigger and this ongoing operation. So while doing this, we came across this MV Ruin, which was being used as a pirate mothership. So the pirates have surrendered. There were a crew of 17 personnel on board, 7 from Bulgaria, 1 from Angola, and 9 from Myanmar. So they are all safe. and the ship is now being sent back to its next port of call.
The ruin was run by a Bulgarian company. You can imagine how pleased Bulgaria is, now that both the crew and the ship are free. Bulgaria's Deputy Prime Minister thanked the Indian Navy for its heroics, and she received a warm reply from India's External Affairs Minister. This is the latest incident which proves how India is working hard to secure our seas. And our Navy is at the forefront of that endeavour.
Our next story comes from the land of fire and ice, Iceland. So this week, the Nordic nation is making news for its fire. A volcano erupted in southern Iceland on Saturday. It happened with little notice and unleashed a string of eruptions in the area, leading the authorities to declare a state of emergency. This is the fourth volcanic eruption in the region since December. While such eruptions are common in Iceland, this is one of the biggest in the region since 2021, and it poses a big risk to geothermal infrastructure. Here's a report.
Blaring sirens, an orange-hued dark sky, plumes of smoke, and glowing magma oozing out of it. What seems to be the gates of hell opening up is a scene from the land of fire and ice, Iceland. A volcano erupted in southern Iceland on Saturday night, the fourth in the region since December and one of the biggest since 2021. Lava fountains burst out of the ground near the town of Grindavik, home to about 4,000 people, and the Blue Lagoon, one of Iceland's most famous tourist attractions. Residents and visitors were evacuated shortly after the eruption.
I've never experienced anything like that before.
The eruption happened with little notice. According to the Meteorological Office, the indications were received about 40 minutes ahead of the eruption, and the first warning was sent only moments before the eruption.
So this was definitely expected. There had already been several statements issued from the Icelandic Met Office about an imminent eruption in the area, but of course the exact time of it starting is it's not possible to predict.
Authorities have declared a state of emergency. As we speak, the lava flow has slowed down in pace.
So the rate of lava flow is getting lower and lower, it seems like, and the barriers that were built around the town, they are diverting the flow around it. Most of the flow is going east of the town towards the sea, so it looks like the barriers are really doing the job they were designed for.
However, the lava stream is still moving forward, and this poses a major threat. It's about 650 feet away from the region's water pipe. This is the distribution pipe of a geothermal plant. It provides hot water for most of the region, so this is crucial infrastructure, and the moving lava could damage it. But there's a bigger problem here. The lava is flowing southwards. If it continues to, it could reach the sea. If it comes into contact with seawater, it will become unstable, leading to minor explosions and toxic fumes. But there's not much anyone can do about it. So far, authorities hope that the lava flow stops on its own. There are risks here, but Iceland is not too worried. After all, it's not their first rodeo. Iceland is one of the most volcanically active places on Earth. An eruption occurs every 3 to 5 years. In fact, this has spawned an entirely new branch of tourism: volcano tourism. Adventurers from all over the world fly to Iceland. They bike, hike, or abseil across active volcanoes. These eruptions attract hundreds of thousands of visitors. Chances are this volcano too will help Iceland turn its lemons into lemonade, though waiting for that to happen can feel like playing with fire.
For our last story tonight, we thought of Monday motivation, and for a change, it's coming from the US. The US seems to be celebrating everything, and they have weird days like a beer day, a garlic day, a bobblehead day. We're not making this up. These are national days in America. They may sound silly, but there are others which are thought-provoking, like today. It's Forgive Mom and Dad Day. It sounds like parental agenda or pop psychology propaganda, but the US observes it today on March 18th, Forgive Mom and Dad Day. No historical proof is tied to this day, but the message is quite simple. Your parents did their best most of the time. Their instincts were spot on, but sometimes they made mistakes. They perhaps did not mean to, but they did. So today you can think about it, accept it, and forgive them. Because at the end of the day, they tried their best, and that's what counts. That's the long story short, except it's not. It throws up a whole lot of questions too, like why must children forgive their parents? And if they do, what difference does it make? Does it rebuild a relationship? Does it boost connection? It's a complex problem. It was once thought that 4 major factors affect a child: gender, sexual orientation, genetic relatedness to parents, and the way the child was conceived. These factors were believed to define the psychological and emotional development of children. But a few years ago, science scratched that. So apparently they do not matter so much anymore. Now experts point to one major factor, and that is familial bonds, or the concept of family connection, the relationship between parent and child. The better and stronger the bond, the better it is for the child. If children feel accepted and nurtured at home, they can build a healthy identity. If family connections are strong, children have a high likelihood of flourishing in life. Look at this study held across 26 countries. It says a child's chances improve by 49% if family bonds are strong. So it's all about the quality of your relationship. And what affects this quality? Very few surveys are done on this. They say socioeconomic factors do not really play a big role. The age of the child does. Young children are deeply connected. Adolescents tend to have a lower quality of relationship with parents, and once you're an adult, things tend to improve again. Plus, if the parents get on well with each other, it helps the child. But again, the research is limited here, so it is dangerous to generalize. Instead, let's look at an individual case tonight. Yours. Scientists say family connection depends on 5 categories: care, support, safety, respect, participation. So today we urge you to introspect, to look at your bond with your parents and grade each of these factors on a scale of 1 to 10. Care, support, safety, respect, participation. And don't expect a 10 on 10 on each factor. For that, you'll have to live inside a Hallmark movie. So be kind to yourself and your folks. Because parenthood is a fulfilling but demanding job. Parents learn on the go. There is no manual. Well, there are, but they help only so much. So goof-ups are part of the job. But accepting them and deciding to move on is a core part of adulthood. Why? If we strip away the morality of it, simply because a body of solid research says that resentment is bad for you. It increases risk of blood pressure, depression, and other health problems. It hinders academic and personal growth. It worsens the quality of sleep. It boosts anxiety. So forgiveness is good, both for you and your family, which is not to say that you have to stay in an abusive relationship or brush problems under the carpet. It just means that you develop real expectations of each other. It means you accept the past and forgive your parents. And if you are a parent, forgive yourself, because most likely you're doing your best. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Spain, thousands of protesters lie down on streets as a tribute to Gaza victims. In London, a new Banksy mural pops up beside a cropped tree. And sandboarding makes a comeback in Namibia for the first time since the pandemic. Finally, we are taking you back in history. On this day in the year 2000, Sen Soybian was elected president of Taiwan. He was leader of the pro-independence movement that sought statehood for Taiwan. His win ended the Nationalist Party's 55-year rule. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.